All right, so let's dive into the world of international political economy. It's fascinating how politics and economics are like totally intertwined.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
every decision in one impacts the other on a global scale.
It is. It's a giant puzzle.
Yeah.
And we're going to explore how thinkers throughout history have tried to understand this complex interplay. We're going all the way back to the 16th century, starting with mercantilism.
Oh, yes, mercantilism. It's all about, you know, countries seeing wealth as a zero-sum game. Like everyone's trying to grab the biggest slice of the pie.
And that pie is made of gold and silver. They're all about hoarding those precious metals.
Exactly. And they do anything to get it. Limit imports, boost exports, you name it.
A classic example is Thomas Munn, that 17th century English merchant. He was all about policies that would, put England ahead.
Oh, yeah. He was a big believer in protectionist policies, like tariffs and subsidies, all to make England richer and more powerful.
It's a very me-first approach, right?
Absolutely. It's all about national power, even at the expense of others.
But then along came Adam Smith, and classical liberalism started to emerge.
Ah, Adam Smith. He really turned things on their head, challenging that whole mercantilist view.
He did. He argued that individual self-interest within a free market could actually lead to more wealth for everyone.
It's the invisible hand at work, guiding the economy toward efficiency, even if everyone's just looking out for themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. Like today, think about the App Store, right? Developers create apps they're passionate about, but it ends up giving everyone so many amazing choices.
Precisely. It's a win-win situation.
So Smith, along with other classical liberals like David Ricardo and John Stuart Mill, they championed free trade, limited government intervention, letting the market do its thing.
They believed in cooperation, not this constant economic warfare.
Yeah, a much more optimistic view of the global economy. But hold on, not everyone was on board with this free trade utopia, were they?
You're right. We also see economic nationalism popping up around the 19th century, especially with thinkers like Alexander Hamilton
Oh, Hamilton.
and Friedrich List.
So they weren't exactly against trade, but they saw the need for like a more strategic approach.
Exactly. They said countries, especially new ones, need to protect their industries, at least until they can compete with those big established players.
So it's like giving them a chance to grow and stand on their own 2 feet eventually.
Exactly. Hamilton, he was a huge supporter of American manufacturing in the early days. He said, look, we need to catch up with Britain.
So it's less about rejecting free trade and more about like being smart and practical about national development.
Absolutely. They saw the government as a key player in shaping the economy, making sure the country sees competitive on the world stage.
Okay, so we've gone from hoarding gold to free markets to a more hands-on approach with the government. But things are about to get really interesting. As we move into the 19th and 20th centuries with Karl Marx and his critique of capitalism.
Marx, he really throws a wrench into things, doesn't he?
He does. He argued that capitalism, despite its successes, is ultimately exploitative.
He saw it as a system that inevitably leads to a small group holding all the wealth, while the working class struggles to survive.
A stark contrast to those optimistic classical liberals. He didn't see any invisible hand leading to harmony.
Not at all. Marx believed that this constant pursuit of profit, this drive to expand, it would eventually lead to capitalism destroying itself.
He saw all these inherent contradictions that would lead to unrest and revolution. And his analysis of British colonialism in India is a really powerful example, isn't it?
It is.
He showed how the British got rich by exploiting Indian resources and labor.
Yeah, for Marx, colonialism was just capitalism on a global scale, powerful nations taking advantage of weaker ones.
So he's saying capitalism isn't just about economics, it's about power and control, too.
Exactly. He saw it as a system that creates winners and losers, and ultimately he predicted its downfall.
Wow, what a shift. We've gone from mercantilism to free markets and now to a complete critique of the whole system. It's amazing how different these perspectives are.
It really is. And the story doesn't end there. We'll see how these ideas evolve even further as we move into the 20th century.
I can't wait. This is getting really fascinating.
The 20th century, especially after those huge events like the Great Depression and World War II, you see all these new schools of thought emerging. Like people are trying to understand this new, rapidly changing world.
So what were some of the big ideas that came out of that?
Well, you have contemporary liberalism starting to take shape in that post-war era. Thinkers like Robert Kiyane, he was a big name in international relations. He said, even without one superpower calling all the shots, countries can still cooperate.
So even after all that devastation, there was still like hope for working together.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of that hope was pinned on international institutions, like the UN, the World Bank, the IMF. They saw these organizations as ways to, like, keep the peace and promote cooperation on things like trade.
So it's like if countries are talking and working together, it's less likely they'll start fighting.
Exactly. Like having a referee in the global game of politics.
Makes sense.
And these contemporary liberals, they were also thinking about globalization, like how to promote free trade, but also deal with the downsides.
Right, because globalization isn't always sunshine and rainbows. Some people lose their jobs, the environment can suffer.
Exactly. So they talked about, safety nets for workers, investing in education training, even international agreements to protect the environment and workers' rights.
So it's not just about letting the market run wild, it's about making sure everyone benefits, right?
Absolutely. It's about making globalization work for everyone.
And what about those economic nationalist ideas? Did they disappear with globalization?
Not at all. You still have people pushing back against this idea of totally free trade.
Really? So the whole free trade versus protectionism debate never really went away?
Nope. You have someone like Robert Wade. He studied those miracle economies in East Asia.
Oh, like Japan, South Korea, those places?
Exactly. He said their success wasn't just about free markets, but also about smart government intervention.
So they weren't just letting the global forces take over, they were actively shaping their economies.
Yeah. They called it the developmental state. The government was picking winners and losers, investing in key industries.
So it's more nuanced than just saying free markets are good or bad. It depends on the situation.
Exactly. The role of the government can change depending on what the country needs.
Interesting. And what about Marx? Did his ideas stick around?
Oh, absolutely. Marx's thought kept evolving too. One guy, Giovanni Arrighi, he said we were moving from industrial capitalism to financial capitalism.
What does that mean, financial capitalism?
Well, think about it. Before, profits mostly came from making and selling stuff, right?
Right, tangible goods.
But now, with these huge financial markets, people are making money from, well, money.
So it's like the focus shifted from producing things to just playing with money itself.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And Arrighi saw this as like another form of exploitation. It just highlights those inequalities that Marx was talking about.
Okay, so we've got this debate about the role of government, globalization, and Marx's ideas still floating around. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but there's even more. In the late 20th century, you get this rise of positive political economy.
Positive political economy. What's that?
It's basically using like economics tools, things like game theory, to understand international politics.
So it's like a more scientific way of looking at how countries interact.
Yeah, exactly. People like Bruno Frey, they said organizations like the UN can help countries work together by sharing information, reducing uncertainty, making things more predictable.
But how do we know these organizations will actually act in everyone's best interests?
That's the big question. And that's something positive political economy tries to figure out. Like, how do you design these institutions so they actually benefit everyone, not just the powerful countries?
It's like you can't just build them and hope for the best. You have to make sure they function properly.
Exactly. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. There are so many different lenses we can use to understand this complex world.
It's fascinating how each approach brings something new to the table. We've gone from grand historical narratives to, like you said, a more scientific approach.
It's a rich field, full of debate and different perspectives.
And I'm guessing there are even more perspectives out there.
You bet. There are approaches that challenge those traditional ways of thinking even further.
It's amazing, right? Like how these ideas have actually shaped the world.
Oh, absolutely. Trade policies, international relations, even how we think about things like poverty and climate change.
Yeah, and they all challenge each other, make us think critically about our assumptions.
That's what I love about IPE. It's not about finding the right answer. It's about having this ongoing conversation, this debate about how to make the world a better place.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, out of all these perspectives, which one really speaks to you?
That's a tough one. I think I'm drawn to like a mix of contemporary liberalism and green theory.
Oh, interesting. Why those two?
Well, contemporary liberalism, it feels like pragmatic, hopeful. It's like, yeah, globalization has problems, but we can fix them. Through institutions, policies, making sure everyone benefits.
Right. It's about making it work for everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. And green theory, it reminds us that, hey, the planet matters too. We can't just chase endless growth without thinking about the consequences.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between progress and sustainability.
Exactly.
I can see how those resonate with you, especially given your work.
What about you? Which one sticks out to you?
I think feminist IPE really opened my eyes. It's like we often forget about gender in these discussions about the global economy.
It's so often overlooked, yeah.
But it plays a huge role. It impacts everything from labor markets to who has access to resources.
Absolutely. It's about power dynamics, social structures, all these things that create inequality.
Exactly. And feminist IPE challenges us to see those things and work towards a more just system.
It's a crucial perspective.
So, as we end this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away?
I hope they see just how complex this all is. There's no easy answer. There's no single right way to look at the global political economy.
It's about understanding all these different viewpoints, right?
Exactly. And then using that knowledge to engage in these conversations, to advocate for change.
To make the world a little bit better, a little bit fairer.
Exactly.
Well said. And to our listener, keep exploring these ideas, keep learning, stay curious.
There's always more to discover, more to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another exciting journey into the world of ideas.